So in the context of the recent election, some words have become powerfully relevant to our campus. Racism, misogyny, even executive order. On their own, these are visceral, nasty terms, but when looked at in the long run, these are words that lead to peace, prosperity, and progress. Now I know this logic seems paradoxical and counterintuitive, but by the end of this speech, I hope you'll walk away with not only a powerful sense to fight against injustice, but maybe even gain a long-range view that will help you through the coming years. History, according to the philosopher Hegel, consists of three distinct phases. It consists of a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. A thesis is a broad, overarching ideal, and an antithesis is an extreme, sharp contrast that occurs immediately after it. A synthesis is likewise the merging together of the thesis and the antithesis in order to reach equilibrium and make progress. Hegel's logic repeatedly plays out in U.S. history over and over and over again. A wildly impactful era is always countered by an abrupt, sudden reaction before settling into a middle ground that moves us forward. I know this still seems odd and abstract, but now I'll use our own history to prove it to you. In U.S. history, events are rarely good or evil, black or white. Everything is immensely gray. Take, for example, national heroes like FDR. Yes, he was an immensely liberal and influential president, but he was also part of the antithesis of individual rights. Soon after the Progressive Era began, soon after presidents like Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson granted women the right to vote and allowed our Senate to be directly elected and represent the interests of the people, FDR came in and he attacked the thesis of equal liberty. He imprisoned millions of Japanese Americans in the U.S. equivalent of concentration camps just 75 years ago from this exact date. This post-progressive antithesis was further compounded by the 1950 segregation until a synthesis was formed. 1960s civil rights legislation and sensitization to race. This example shows us how our history doesn't necessarily follow a clear direct line. It's more or less a zigzag between extremes before it reaches an equilibrium. This long path to an equilibrium can now be extended to how our society views some people as national villains. Although we now recognize Japanese Americans as our fellow countrymen, some people nonetheless categorize Muslims as people to be feared. However, blaming billions of people for the acts of a few by no means justifies labeling an entire religion as a call for criminals. This is something I think we all can agree with. But I'm going to take a risky step tonight, however. I'm going to throw caution to the wind and say that this logic can be applied to other groups of national villains as well. Take, for example, Trump voters on this very campus. Because we agree that the acts of a few can never define a group as a whole, we must consider that not all Trump supporters, not every single one of the 63 million Republican voters are monsters. For example, although I personally didn't vote for our current president, I have many friends and family who did, and they didn't do this for racist, misogynistic, xenophobic, or criminal reasons. They did this because they were simply worried about the rising health insurance premiums, and they don't know if they can pay next month's rent. Because they were struggling to get by, and were simply terrified of their future and scared of the direction our country was heading. A perfect example of this type of voter is a person who supported both Obama and Trump in their respective elections. Now, although it's important to speak out against injustice, we must begin to examine how our country could be so progressive and unprejudiced as to elect and re-elect our first black president, only to, a couple years later, elect his greatest antithesis, some might say his nemesis, as our next president. Fortunately, though, Hegel has a solution. After 8 years of a thesis, after 8 years of the ideals of healthcare, equality, and liberalism, history decrees that a synthesis, a respite, must follow. Hegel shows us that human nature reflects a desire to swing from one extreme to another before settling into an equilibrium. It was Hegel, it was Obama himself in his post-election speech who said that progress was a ship that twists and turns but overall follows a straight path. It was Obama who, after the election, shook hands and warmly welcomed his greatest antithesis into the most powerful position in the world. Obama, like Hegel, must have understood something about human nature. But that doesn't make it any easier. Living through an antithesis isn't easy for some, particularly here, for so many of us embrace the progressive ideals of the Obama administration. Feeling betrayed, feeling scared, and feeling motivated to fight and march for your beliefs is entirely natural. In fact, Hegel would say it's quintessential to reaching the equilibrium we need. Even though it might be difficult to see it right now, a respite will follow, and the current state of the country must change. For all those whose lives have been marred by the new administration, for all those who fight against racism, against misogyny, against xenophobia, for the millions of people taking to the streets to make sure that their voices are heard, be strong, and take comfort in this. History and Hegel tell us that the pattern of a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis really will, with time, make America great again.